In this video I will discuss two interesting concepts introduced to us by Carl Jung, which are introversion and extroversion. And even though we use these terms quite often, we often also only scratch the surface of the full meaning of these terms. So in this video I will investigate this full meaning, and I will explore how Carl Jung developed these terms, what it means according to Jung to be either an introvert or an extrovert, and how the full essence of these terms can give us a better understanding of our own personality. For as Carl Jung wrote, "The ultimate aim and strongest desire of all mankind is to develop that fullness of life which is called personality." So after speaking to many of his patients, Carl Jung, he concluded that there exist two fundamentally different attitudes towards life. According to Carl Jung, one attitude can be characterized by an interest in external objects, which is extroversion, while the other can be characterized by an interest in the subject, which is introversion. And this definition relates closely to the definition we employ today. We consider extroverts to be more outgoing, while we consider introverts to be mainly focused on their own private experiences. Carl Jung, however, elaborately discussed each attitude and therefore gives us the opportunity to comprehend with greater detail what it means to be either an introvert or an extrovert. So as mentioned, Carl Jung observed that extroverts are mainly interested in external objects. According to Carl Jung, extroverts can be characterized by a desire to join in on events. They enjoy being influenced by these events and they are quick to accept the consequences of external events. At the same time, extroverts, they have a high capacity to endure certain louder and more active surroundings, and they might even prefer such surroundings. Moreover, extroverts, they find it easy to make connections and are not that selective during this process. Carl Jung's discussion on the extrovert attitude becomes particularly interesting when he discusses how, through an extrovert's attention towards the external objective world, the subjective world is often left in the dark. Jung wrote, "The actual subject, the extrovert as a subjective entity, is so far as possible shrouded in darkness. He hides it from himself under veils of unconsciousness." Moreover, according to Jung, the internal life of an extrovert takes place outside of the individual, in the open for everybody to see and understand. Jung wrote, "The psychic life of this type of person is enacted, as it were, outside himself, in the environment. He lives in and through others. All self-communings give him the creeps." As such, Jung believed that the extrovert attitude is more familiar to us and easier to understand, because this attitude is easier to observe and because an extrovert actually shares his or her attitude with the world. And as a result, introversion is a bit harder to describe. As opposed to an extrovert, introverts, according to Jung, are constantly pulling away from external objects and events, moving into their own private internal worlds more frequently. At the same time, introverts do not find it pleasant to be in large crowds. As Jung wrote, "He holds aloof from external happenings, does not join in, has a distinct dislike of society as soon as he finds himself among too many people. In a large gathering, he feels lonely and lost. The more crowded it is, the greater becomes his resistance." Moreover, according to Jung, the introvert approaches the external world carefully. He or she is afraid to make mistakes during social interactions. And Jung wrote, "His apprehensiveness of the object is not due to fear, but to the fact that it seems to him negative, demanding, overpowering, or even mincing." Resulting from this more negative attitude towards the external world, the introvert can be characterized by a more defensive attitude, which the introvert him or herself will come to dislike as well. Jung wrote, "He confronts the world with an elaborate defensive system, compounded of scrupulosity, pedantry, frugality, cautiousness, painful conscientiousness, stiff-lipped rectitude, politeness, and open-eyed distrust. As a result, only the internal world feels like a safe place for the introvert. Introverts prefer to be by themselves, do things their own way, and at the same time are not easily convinced by the opinions of others or of the majority." Jung wrote, "Crowds, majority views, public opinion, popular enthusiasm never convince him of anything, but merely make him creep still deeper into a shell." As such, compared to extroverts, introverts, they often have fewer friends, and it's a lot harder to comprehend what is going on in the psychic life of an introvert, because the internal life is almost entirely private, whereas the extrovert is often more open to share these private events with the world. Jung wrote, "Should any difficulties and conflicts arise in this inner world, all doors and windows are shut tight. The introvert shuts himself up with his complexes until he ends in complete isolation." As a result, the attitude of the introvert appears a bit more negative at first, because introverts they appear a lot colder, more mistrustful, and a lot more defensive. These attitudes are less accepted by our current society than the attitudes of extroverts, according to Jung, because extroverts they are a lot more open. However, by retreating into their own internal worlds, introverts, according to Jung, can still contribute a lot to society. Jung wrote, "In spite of these peculiarities, the introvert is by no means a social loss. His retreat into himself is not a final renunciation of the world, but a search for quietude where alone it is possible for him to make his contribution to the life of the community." To conclude, it's interesting to note that Jung observed that the misunderstandings surrounding the identity of introverts are often cherished by introverts themselves, because they enjoy a certain mysticism surrounding their personality. Jung wrote, "This type of person is the victim of numerous misunderstandings, not unjustly, for he actually invites them. Nor can he be acquitted of the charge of taking a secret delight in this mystification, and that being misunderstood gives him a certain satisfaction." So these differing attitudes result in an interesting situation. Fundamentally, introverts they trust their own internal world a lot more, while extroverts put more faith into the external world. According to Jung, there is of course no right or wrong approach, which in a sense results in the existence of two different worlds. Whereas extroverts they often neglect the internal world, introverts they often neglect the external world. Jung wrote, "What alone is valid for him is his subjective world, which he sometimes believes in moments of delusion to be the objective one. We could easily charge these people with the worst kind of subjectivism, if it were certain beyond a doubt that only one objective world existed. But this truth, if such it be, is not axiomatic, it is merely a half-truth, the other half of which is the fact that the world also is as it is seen by human beings." Resulting from these differing attitudes and the focus on these differing worlds, introverts and extroverts they approach the real outside world differently. Resulting from their more negative attitudes towards the external world, introverts are often less capable to adapt to the external circumstances and often act less quickly. Jung wrote, "The reflective nature of the introvert causes him always to think and consider before acting. This naturally makes him slow to act. His shyness and distrust of things induces hesitation, and so he always has difficulty in adapting to the external world." Extroverts, not surprisingly, have a more positive attitude towards the real external world. They are a lot less mistrustful and defensive, and therefore also able to respond a lot quicker to external events. Jung wrote, "The extrovert has a positive relation to things. He is, so to speak, attracted by them. New, unknown situations fascinate him. In order to make closer acquaintance with the unknown, he will jump into it with both feet." Perhaps surprisingly, Carl Jung actually proposed that these two types appear to be created for each other, and a relationship between two different types can have several benefits, because they complete each other. Jung wrote, "The two types therefore seem created for a symbiosis. The one takes care of reflection, and the other sees to the initiative and union." Although the different realities of each type might lead to misunderstandings, there is room for understanding, according to Jung, because the opposing attitude is, although it may not have been developed, still present within each individual. Jung wrote, "Although he has developed only one of them as a function of adaptation, we shall immediately conjecture that with the introvert, extroversion lies dormant and undeveloped somewhere in the background, and that introversion leads a similar shadowy existence in the extrovert." So Jung used the example of the discovery of a castle to illustrate this point. According to Jung, when an introvert and an extrovert were to venture upon a secluded castle together, at first the extrovert he will be eager to enter and explore the castle, whereas the introvert will prefer not to, because he or she will imagine all the things that can go wrong if they actually enter the castle. However, if they do enter the castle, it might just turn out to be the case that the introvert enjoys it more and even wants to stay longer than the extrovert. The extrovert, for example, will have imagined all kinds of interesting things which are going on in the castle. Therefore, he might feel bored when not much interesting things are going on. At the same time, the introvert, having imagined all kinds of things that can go wrong, might become fascinated by the artwork or some scriptures hidden within the castle. So according to Jung, in this scenario, the roles actually reverse, because the extrovert becomes an introvert and the introvert an extrovert. Jung wrote, "At this point, the types invert themselves. The introvert, who at first resisted the idea of going in, cannot now be induced to go out, and the extrovert curses the moment when he set foot inside the castle. The former is now fascinated by the object, the latter by his negative thoughts." So Carl Jung, he argued that a certain kind of typology is required to understand the immense differences between individuals. He wrote, "It is a critical tool for the research worker who needs definite points of view and guidelines if he is to reduce the chaotic profusion of individual experience to any kind of order. At the same time, typology is also a tool for individuals to better understand their own behavior or the behavior of others." The typology of Carl Jung goes far beyond the present discussion on introversion and extroversion. Besides these two differing attitudes, Carl Jung also described 4 additional functions, which are thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. These functions are, however, always combined with 2 different attitudes, introversion and extroversion. As such, each function can present itself either in an introverted fashion or in an extroverted fashion. And I will discuss these 4 different functions in a future video as well. So please let me know whether you think you're an extrovert or an introvert, and thank you very much for watching this video.